The bus lurched to a stop and Maya grabbed the metal pole to steady herself. She glanced at her phone. 7:45 in the morning, 15 minutes until her shift started at the Grandview Hotel. She stepped onto the sidewalk, adjusting the blazer she'd borrowed from her roommate because her own interview clothes had seen better days. The hotel stood tall against the morning sky, all glass and polished stone. Maya had walked past this building 100 times, never imagining she'd actually work here. But life had a funny way of leading you to places you never expected. She pushed through the revolving doors and felt the cool rush of air conditioning. The lobby stretched before her like something from a magazine. Marble floors reflected the light from crystal chandeliers. Leather couches sat in perfect arrangements. Everything looked expensive and untouchable. You must be the temp. A woman in a crisp navy suit appeared beside her. Mrs. Chen, the hotel manager. They'd spoken briefly on the phone 2 days ago. "Follow me. We don't have much time for training." Maya's stomach tightened. This was always the worst part of temporary work. Walking into a new place, learning new systems, pretending you belonged when everyone knew you'd be gone in a few weeks. They moved behind the reception desk, and Mrs. Chen started clicking through the computer system at lightning speed. Reservations here, cancellations here. Special requests go in this field. Questions? Maya had about 50 questions, but she just shook her head. She'd figure it out as she went. She always did. The regular receptionist is out on maternity leave for 3 weeks. Just keep things running smoothly and don't bother the guests unless they need something. Mrs. Chen handed her a name tag. "Your shift ends at 4. Don't be late, don't call in sick, and smile." Then she was gone, heels clicking across the marble, leaving Maya alone behind a desk she barely knew how to operate. The first few hours were a blur. Guests checking in, guests checking out. Phone calls about room service, questions about nearby restaurants. Maya smiled until her face hurt. She messed up a reservation and had to call Mrs. Chen to fix it. A businessman complained about his room key not working. An elderly woman couldn't figure out the coffee maker in her suite. By lunch, Maya's feet ached and she hadn't even sat down. She thought about the community college courses she'd had to drop last semester. Business management, marketing fundamentals. She'd been so close to finishing her associate degree. But then her mother got sick and medical bills started piling up like snow in winter. The college had been understanding. "Take a semester off," her advisor had said. "Come back when you're ready." But Maya knew how these things went. 1 semester turned into 2. 2 turned into never. Dreams got pushed aside for rent and groceries and keeping the lights on. She grabbed a protein bar from her bag and ate it in 3 bites behind the desk. Lunch break wasn't really a thing at reception when you were the only one there. The afternoon dragged on. Maya's mind wandered while she processed paperwork. She thought about the business plan she'd started writing 2 years ago. A consulting service for small nonprofits who couldn't afford big fancy firms. She'd done all the research, mapped out the services, even designed a logo on a free website. The folder sat in her closet now, collecting dust beneath winter coats she rarely wore. "Excuse me, miss?" Maya looked up to find a teenager staring at her, clearly lost. "I'm supposed to meet my parents in the restaurant, but I have no idea where it is." She smiled, gave him directions, and watched him disappear down the hallway. That was the thing about hotels. Everyone was just passing through. Guests came and went. Even the staff rotated. Nobody stayed long enough to really know anyone. Around 3 o'clock, Maya started organizing the desk drawers. The previous receptionist had left them a mess. Pens mixed with paper clips, sticky notes scattered everywhere, old receipts crumpled in corners. In the back of the bottom drawer, she found a small piece of paper taped to the wood. Someone had written in faded blue ink, "One conversation can change everything." Maya stared at it for a moment. It was the kind of thing people posted on social media with sunset photos. Pretty words that didn't mean much in real life. In her experience, conversations with wealthy hotel guests went like this. "I need extra towels. The Wi-Fi password isn't working. Can you call me a taxi?" Nobody's life changed because a guest asked for extra towels. She almost threw the paper away but left it taped there instead. Maybe the regular receptionist found it comforting. Maybe it helped get through long shifts. At 4 o'clock, Maya clocked out and headed for the bus stop. The evening air felt thick and warm. Summer in the city always felt like breathing through a wet blanket. She pulled out her phone and checked her bank account while waiting. $217 until next Friday. Rent was due in a week. Her mother needed a prescription refill. The bus pass needed renewing. She closed the banking app and opened her messages. Her best friend had sent a photo from her new job at a marketing agency. Big office, standing desk, free snacks in the break room. "Loving it here," the caption said. Maya typed back, "That's amazing. So happy for you." And she meant it. She really did. But there was a small, ugly part of her that wondered why some people got smooth paths while others got roads full of potholes. The bus arrived and she climbed on, finding a seat by the window. Outside, the city rolled past. Coffee shops with outdoor seating. Boutiques with mannequins and summer dresses. People walking dogs, carrying shopping bags, laughing with friends. Maya's apartment was in a different part of town. Older buildings. Cracked sidewalks. Laundromats instead of boutiques. She shared a 2-bedroom with her roommate, and her mother stayed in the living room on a pull-out couch since getting out of the hospital. When she got home, her mother was watching a cooking show, wrapped in a blanket despite the heat. "How was the new job, Mija?" "Fine, just a hotel desk. Nothing special." Maya dropped her bag and headed to the kitchen. "You take your medicine?" Yes. Stop worrying so much, but Maya couldn't help worrying. That's what happened when you almost lost someone. You worried all the time? She made dinner from whatever was in the fridge. Pasta with jarred sauce and frozen vegetables. They ate on the couch, her mother commenting on the TV chef's technique. Maya half listening while thinking about tomorrow's shift. Later, lying in bed, Maya stared at the ceiling. 28 years old and still figuring out what came next. Everyone said your 20s were for building your future, but what if you spent them just trying to survive? She thought about that quote in the desk drawer. One conversation can change everything. It was a nice idea, but Maya had learned not to count on nice ideas. She'd learned to count on herself, her own 2 hands, and whatever work she could find. Tomorrow she'd go back to the hotel, smile at guests, process reservations, and collect her paycheck. 3 weeks of work, then on to the next temporary thing. That was the plan. That was always the plan. She had no way of knowing that in 5 days, a man would walk through those revolving doors and prove that sometimes, just sometimes, those pretty quotes actually meant something. Day 5 started like all the others. Maya arrived at 7:55, clocked in, and took her place behind the reception desk. Mrs. Chen walked past without saying good morning. The coffee machine in the lobby hummed its usual tune. Everything felt predictable and safe in its boredom. Around 10:30, the revolving doors spun and a man walked in. Maya had checked in dozens of guests by now. She'd gotten good at reading them in the first few seconds. The business travelers who barely made eye contact, already on their phones. The tourists who asked a million questions about local attractions. The wealthy ones who expected everyone to jump at their slightest need. But this man didn't fit any of those categories. He looked to be in his mid-50s, with gray hair and glasses that sat slightly crooked on his nose. He wore dark jeans and a blazer that had seen better days. No designer luggage trailing behind him. No assistant carrying his bags. Just a single weathered briefcase that looked like it had traveled the world twice over. "Good morning," Maya said, pulling up her smile. "Checking in?" "Yes, please. Should be under James Whitmore." His voice was warm, the kind that made you feel like he was actually listening when you spoke. Maya typed in the name and found his reservation. 1 week stay, standard room. Nothing fancy. She processed his information, printed out the key cards, and was about to launch into her standard welcome speech when something caught her eye. The man had set his briefcase on the counter while he dug out his wallet. Through the worn leather, she could see a book spine sticking out. The title made her freeze. Social Entrepreneurship, Creating Sustainable Change. It was the exact textbook from her business management course. The one she'd had to drop. She'd spent $200 on that book and never even finished the first half. "Find everything okay?" James asked, noticing her staring. Maya felt her cheeks heat up. "Sorry, yes. That book. I recognize it." His eyebrows lifted with genuine interest. "You've read it?" "Well, started it. I was taking a class at community college, but..." She trailed off. Why was she telling a complete stranger this? "Anyway, here are your keys. Room 412. Elevators are to your right." But James didn't pick up the keys. Instead, he pulled the book from his briefcase and held it up. "What did you think of Chapter 3? The section on identifying market gaps in underserved communities. Maya blinked. Guests didn't ask her opinion on things. Guests asked where the ice machine was. I thought it was interesting, she said carefully. The author talks about how the best business opportunities come from actually listening to what people need, instead of assuming you know better. Exactly. James set the book down with a soft thump. Too many people try to force solutions that sound good on paper but don't work in real life. You need to understand the problem from the inside. Before Maya could respond, another guest approached the desk with a question about restaurant reservations. She helped them quickly, aware that James was still standing there, waiting. When she turned back, he was studying her name tag. Maya, he said thoughtfully, tell me something. Why'd you stop taking the class? The question was direct but not pushy. Still, it felt too personal to share with a hotel guest she'd known for 5 minutes. Life got complicated, she said simply. Had to put school on hold for a bit. James nodded like he understood more than she'd said. He picked up his key cards but didn't move toward the elevators. I dropped out of college twice, he said. First time because I couldn't afford it. Second time because I thought I knew everything and didn't need it. Turns out I was an idiot both times. Maya couldn't help but smile. But you figured it out eventually? Eventually. Took me 20 years and a lot of failures, but yes. He tapped the textbook. If you ever want to talk about the rest of this book, I'll be around for the week. Fair warning, though, I have very strong opinions about Chapter 7. Then he was gone, heading toward the elevators with his worn briefcase and crooked glasses. Maya stood there feeling slightly off balance, like she'd just had a conversation in a different language and somehow understood it perfectly. The rest of the day moved slowly. She kept thinking about what James had said, how he'd dropped out twice, how it took him 20 years to figure things out. There was something comforting in knowing that successful-looking people had messy paths too. The next morning, Maya arrived to find James already in the lobby. He'd claimed a corner table near the windows and had his laptop open, papers spread everywhere. When he saw her, he waved. During her first break, Maya grabbed coffee from the machine and found herself drifting toward his table. Mind if I ask what you're working on? She said. James looked up and smiled. Investment proposals. I run a venture fund that backs companies trying to solve social problems. Education, healthcare, that sort of thing. Like the businesses in that textbook. Exactly like that. He gestured to the empty chair. Sit for a minute. Tell me what you wanted to do with your degree. Maya sat cupping her coffee like a shield. I had this idea for a consulting service. Small nonprofits barely have any budget, right? They can't afford the big consulting firms. But they still need help with strategy, marketing, fundraising. I thought maybe I could offer those services at rates they could actually pay. She waited for him to tell her it was naive, that nonprofits didn't have money for consultants no matter how cheap, that she didn't have enough experience. Instead, James leaned back in his chair studying her. Have you done any market research? Talked to nonprofits about what they'd actually pay for? Some. I called about 20 organizations last year. Most of them said they'd love help but couldn't afford traditional consulting rates. A few said they'd consider it if the price was right. That's good initial validation. He pulled out a notebook and started scribbling. What stopped you from moving forward? Money, time. My mom got sick and needed surgery. The medical bills were... Maya shook her head. It just wasn't the right time. And now? Now I'm working temporary jobs and trying to keep everything from falling apart. James was quiet for a moment, still writing in his notebook. When he looked up, his expression was serious. I've been doing this work for 15 years. You know what the biggest challenge is? Finding people who actually understand struggle, who know what it's like to choose between paying rent and following a dream. Most people on my team went to Harvard or Stanford. They're brilliant, but they've never had to decide whether to buy groceries or textbooks. Maya didn't know what to say to that. I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable, James continued. I'm just saying that your experience isn't a weakness. It's actually the most valuable thing you have. A family approached the reception desk then, and Maya had to excuse herself. She helped them check in, gave them directions to their room, and answered questions about the pool hours. The whole time, her mind was spinning. Over the next 2 days, a pattern emerged. James would work in the lobby during Maya's shifts. During her breaks, she'd join him for coffee. They talked about business models and market gaps. He asked her opinion on investment proposals he was reviewing. She told him about the nonprofit landscape she'd researched. He never talked down to her, never made her feel stupid for not having a degree or fancy credentials. He just listened like her ideas actually mattered. On day 8, during a particularly slow afternoon, James showed her a pitch deck from a startup seeking funding. "What do you think?" he asked. "Would you invest?" Maya read through it carefully. The company wanted to create an app connecting low-income families with free educational resources. "It looked good on the surface. I don't know," she said slowly. "The problem is real, but I'm not sure they understand their target audience. They're assuming these families have smartphones and reliable internet. A lot of them don't. Or they have phones but limited data plans. An app might not be the best solution." James smiled, and it wasn't a small smile. "That's exactly what I thought. My team wanted to invest, but something felt off. You just articulated what I couldn't quite put into words." Really, you have an instinct for this, Maya, for seeing past the fancy presentations to what actually works." Maya felt something shift in her chest. It was a small feeling, barely there, but it felt a lot like hope. She had no idea that tomorrow James would make her an offer that would change everything. She just knew that for the first time in a long time, someone saw her as more than a temporary receptionist, filling space behind a desk, and maybe that quote in the drawer was right after. All maybe one conversation really could change everything. Day 10 started with rain, the kind that came down in sheets and made everyone who walked through the revolving doors look miserable and drenched. Maya had gotten soaked waiting for the bus, and her shoes squeaked against the marble floor. James was already at his usual table, though today he seemed more focused than normal. He'd been on phone calls all morning, and Maya noticed him glancing toward the reception desk between conversations. She tried not to read too much into it. In 2 days, her temporary position would end. The regular receptionist would return from maternity leave, and Maya would move on to whatever job came next. That's how temporary work went. You didn't get attached to places or people, but she'd be lying if she said she wouldn't miss these morning conversations. Around 11, during a rare quiet moment, James approached the desk. His expression was different today, more serious, almost nervous. "Maya, do you have a few minutes? I'd like to talk to you about something." Her stomach did a small flip. Had she done something wrong? Said something during their conversations that offended him? "Sure, my break is in 10 minutes. Perfect. Meet me at the table?" Those 10 minutes crawled by like hours. Maya checked in a businessman who barely looked up from his phone. She answered a call about housekeeping. She straightened the brochures on the desk 3 times. When her break finally came, she walked to James's table feeling like she was heading to a test she hadn't studied for. He had 2 cups of coffee waiting. He'd learned how she took hers. "Cream, no sugar. Sit down," he said gently, "and try not to look so worried. You're not in trouble." Maya sat, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Okay." James took off his glasses and cleaned them with his shirt, which seemed like a stalling tactic. When he put them back on, he looked directly at her. "I've been watching you this week. Not in a creepy way," he added quickly, "but I've seen how you handle difficult guests. That man yesterday who was yelling about his room not being ready, you calmed him down in under 2 minutes. You didn't get defensive or upset. You just listened and found a solution." Maya shrugged. "That's just customer service." "No, it's more than that. It's emotional intelligence. It's problem solving under pressure." He leaned forward. "I've also seen how you think. The questions you ask about business models, how you spotted the flaws in that startup pitch, the way you understand what people actually need versus what they say they need." "I don't understand where this is going." James smiled. "I'm getting to it. You know how I told you I run a venture fund? We're launching a new initiative specifically focused on social enterprises, small businesses and nonprofits trying to make real change in their communities. But here's the problem. My team is full of people with MBAs and years of experience, and they're great at spreadsheets and market analysis. What they're not great at is recognizing authentic passion, spotting potential in people who don't fit the traditional mold." He paused, and Maya felt her heartbeat pick up. "I need someone who understands struggle. Someone who knows what it's like to have a dream and no clear path to reach it. Someone who can look at a founder and see past the polished pitch to whether they actually understand the problem they're trying to solve." "That sounds like an important role," Maya said carefully. "It is, and I'd like to offer it to you." The words hung in the air between them. Maya was sure she'd heard wrong. "Offer what to me?" "A job on my team, helping identify and vet potential investments. The official title would be associate analyst, but really, You'd be my eyes and ears for finding companies that deserve support. Maya's mouth went dry. James, I don't have any qualifications for that. I didn't finish my degree. I've never worked in finance or venture capital. I've been doing temporary receptionist work for 2 years. I know all that. And none of it matters to me. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. This is the offer. Take a look. With shaking hands, Maya opened the folder. Inside was a formal job offer letter. Her eyes went straight to the salary line, and she had to read it 3 times to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. It was more than double what she'd ever made, more than she'd thought possible for someone like her. This can't be real, she whispered. It's very real. Full benefits, retirement matching, education assistance if you want to finish your degree. The job is based in my office downtown, but you'd travel sometimes to meet with potential investment partners. Maya's hands were actually trembling now. Why me? You could hire someone with experience, someone who actually knows what they're doing. Because those people all think the same way. They look at the same metrics, ask the same questions, invest in the same type of founders. I need someone different. Someone who can walk into a room and see what everyone else misses. James's voice was firm now, confident. I've been doing this long enough to recognize talent when I see it. And you have something special, Maya. An instinct for reading people and situations. That's not something you can teach in business school. But what if I fail? What if I'm terrible at it? Then you'll learn and get better. That's how every job works, he smiled. I'm not expecting you to be perfect. I'm expecting you to be honest, to work hard, and to bring a perspective my team doesn't have. Can you do that? Maya looked down at the offer letter. Her brain was screaming that this was too good to be true. That people like her didn't get opportunities like this. That she should be suspicious, cautious, practical. But another part of her, a part she'd been ignoring for years, was screaming something else entirely. Can I think about it? The words came out barely above a whisper. Of course. Take the weekend. The offer stands until Monday morning. James stood up, preparing to go back to his work. For what it's worth, I don't make offers lightly. I wouldn't have asked if I didn't believe you could do this. Maya's break ended, and she returned to the reception desk feeling like she was walking through a dream. The afternoon passed in a blur. She checked people in and out, answered phones, smiled at guests, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. That evening on the bus ride home, she read the offer letter again. And again. She pulled out her phone and Googled James Whitmore for the 100th time. Forbes articles. Business profiles. Everything confirmed he was legitimate, successful, respected in his field. When she got home, her mother was sitting at the kitchen table paying bills. The small stack of medical invoices sat beside her checkbook. Good day, mija. Maya sat down across from her. Mom, something happened. Something big. She told her mother everything. About James, their conversations, the job offer. Her mother listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. When Maya finished, she waited for her mother to list all the reasons why this was risky. Why she should stick with what she knew. Why people like them didn't get these kinds of breaks. Instead, her mother reached across the table and took her hand. Do you remember when you were 7 and you wanted to enter the school science fair? You told me you couldn't do it because you didn't have the right materials. We couldn't afford the fancy poster board and equipment. Maya nodded. She remembered. I told you then what I'm telling you now. You work with what you have and you don't let fear make decisions for you. Her mother's grip tightened. This man sees something in you. Maybe it's time you saw it too. But what if I'm not ready? Nobody's ever ready, baby. You just jump and learn to fly on the way down. That night, Maya lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She thought about all the temporary jobs she'd worked. All the times she'd played it safe. All the dreams she'd filed away in that folder in her closet. She thought about that quote in the desk drawer at the hotel. One conversation can change everything. Maybe it wasn't about waiting for the perfect moment. Maybe it was about recognizing the moment when it came and being brave enough to grab it. Outside her window, the rain had stopped. The city lights reflected off wet pavement, making everything look clean and new. Maya pulled out her phone and typed a message to James. I don't need until Monday. My answer is yes. She hit send before she could change her mind. 3 dots appeared immediately, then a response. I was hoping you'd say that. Welcome to the team. We're going to do great things together. Maya set her phone down and took a deep breath. Her hands were still shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from possibility. Maya barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, her brain would jolt awake with a new worry. What if she'd made a huge mistake? What if she showed up on her first day and everyone realized she didn't belong there? What if James regretted his decision? By morning, she'd convinced herself at least 5 times to send another message taking it all back. But she didn't. The weekend passed in a strange blur. She gave her notice to the temp agency, which took exactly 30 seconds. They'd already moved on to lining up her next assignment. "No problem," the coordinator said flatly. "We'll send someone else to finish your last week at the hotel." Just like that, she was replaceable, which made the whole thing with James feel even more unreal. Her roommate thought she was crazy. "You're leaving a sure thing for something that sounds too good to be true," she said while making coffee Sunday morning. "What if it doesn't work out?" "Then I'll find another job," Maya said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "But what if—" "I have to try," Maya interrupted. "I can't spend the rest of my life wondering what if." Her mother, on the other hand, had already started telling everyone. The neighbor. The lady at the corner store. Her church group. "My daughter's working for an investment company now," she'd say, pride radiating from every word. The pressure of that pride sat heavy on Maya's chest. Monday morning arrived too fast. Maya stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes trying to figure out what people wore to venture capital offices. She settled on black pants and a blue blouse, then changed 3 times before going back to the original outfit. The office was downtown in a building with a real doorman and elevators that didn't shake. Maya gave her name at the reception desk and the woman made a phone call. "Someone will be right down for you," she said with a professional smile. Maya sat in the lobby feeling like an imposter. Everyone who walked past looked important and busy. Women in designer suits carrying leather portfolios, men in expensive shoes talking loudly on phones. She should have worn different shoes. Better shoes. Professional shoes. Maya. She looked up to find James walking toward her. Same crooked glasses, same warm smile. Somehow seeing him made everything feel slightly less terrifying. "Ready for your first day?" he asked. "I think so, maybe. Probably not." He laughed. "Perfect, that's exactly the right attitude. Come on, I'll show you around." The office took up the entire 9th floor, open workspace with modern furniture and huge windows overlooking the city. There was a kitchen with one of those fancy coffee machines that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent, meeting rooms with glass walls, even a meditation space with yoga mats and plants. "We're a small team," James explained as they walked. 12 people total. Everyone wears multiple hats, so don't worry if things feel chaotic at first. He introduced her to people whose names immediately flew out of her head. There was someone from Yale, someone who'd worked at Goldman Sachs, someone who'd started 2 companies and sold them both. And then there was Maya, who'd been filing folders at a hotel reception desk 3 days ago. James set her up at a desk near a window. "Your first project is on the computer. I need you to research 3 companies and tell me what you think. Not the financial stuff, my team can do that. I want your gut reaction. Would you trust these founders? Do they understand the communities they're trying to serve? Read everything you can find about them and write up your thoughts. How long should it be? However long it needs to be. Could be a page, could be 10 pages. Just be honest." Then he was off to a meeting and Maya was alone at her desk with a computer screen glowing in front of her. She spent the first hour convinced she'd spelled something wrong in the login. Then she started reading about the first company, a startup creating affordable internet access for rural areas. The founder had a complicated history, came from money, went to an Ivy League school, but had spent 3 years actually living in rural communities learning about their needs. Maya read articles, watched interviews, checked social media. She took notes. She followed threads. By lunch, she'd forgotten to be nervous. The second company was trying to solve food insecurity through urban farming. The founder was a former teacher who'd grown up in food deserts. Her pitch was passionate, but the business model seemed shaky. Maya wrote detailed notes about why the numbers didn't quite add up, even though the mission was solid. The third company made her suspicious immediately. They wanted to disrupt education with an app. But their founder had never taught, never worked in schools, and seemed more interested in the potential profit than the actual kids. By the end of the day, Maya had written 15 pages. She read through it twice, convinced it was terrible. Too long, too detailed, too opinionated. She almost deleted it and started over. But James had said to be honest. She hit send at 5:30 and immediately wanted to call it back. The next morning, James was waiting at her desk when she arrived. "Read your analysis last night," he said. Maya's stomach dropped. "I know it was probably too long and I might have been too harsh on that last company." It was perfect. Exactly what I needed. He set down a printed copy covered in his handwritten notes. "You caught things my entire team missed. That education app founder. We were about to schedule a second meeting with him. You're right that he doesn't actually care about the mission. You could tell just from how he talked about it." "Really?" "Really. In fact, I'm forwarding your analysis to the whole team. This is the kind of thinking I want everyone to bring." The relief was so strong Maya felt dizzy. The weeks that followed were intense. James threw her into meetings, asked her opinion on pitch decks, had her interview founders. Sometimes she felt completely out of her depth. Other times, something would click and she'd see exactly what James was talking about. The difference between someone who wanted to help and someone who wanted to look like they were helping. She made mistakes. She recommended a company that turned out to have major red flags she'd missed. She fumbled through a presentation so badly she wanted to quit on the spot. But James never made her feel stupid. "Mistakes are data," he'd say. "Now you know what to look for next time." 6 weeks in, Maya sat in on her first major investment meeting. The founder was pitching a mentorship platform connecting successful professionals with at-risk youth. The presentation was slick. The numbers looked good. The team seemed capable. Everyone around the table was nodding along. Maya could feel the room moving toward approval, but something felt off. During the Q&A session, she raised her hand. Her voice shook slightly. "Can I ask about your pilot program? You mentioned running it in 3 cities, but I noticed you didn't include any feedback from the actual kids who participated. What did they say about the experience?" The founder paused, clearly not expecting the question. "Well, we have data on completion rates and—" "But what did the kids say? Did they feel the mentorship actually helped them?" Another pause. "We're planning to gather that feedback in the next phase." Maya's instinct kicked in. "So you built the entire platform without asking the kids if they wanted it or if it worked for them?" The room got quiet. The founder fumbled through an answer, but the damage was done. After he left, the team discussed it and ultimately decided to pass on the investment. James caught up with Maya afterward. "That was gutsy, especially for your first big meeting. I probably should have kept quiet." "No, you should have done exactly what you did. You asked the one question that mattered, and it saved us from making a bad investment." He smiled. "See, I told you that you had good instincts." That night, riding the bus home, Maya looked out at the city lights and thought about how different her life looked now. She had business cards with her name on them. She was enrolled in evening MBA classes that the company paid for. Her mother's medical bills were caught up, and they'd moved to a nicer apartment. But the biggest change wasn't the money or the title. It was the way she saw herself. For years, she'd thought of herself as someone just getting by, someone temporary, someone waiting for real life to start. Now she was someone who walked into rooms full of people with fancy degrees and said what needed to be said. Someone whose opinion mattered. Someone who was building something that would last. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "Great work today. Team meeting tomorrow at 9. Come prepared to present your thoughts on those 3 new proposals." Maya smiled and typed back, "I'll be ready." And for the first time in a very long time, she actually believed it. 18 months later, Maya stood in front of a conference room full of people who used to intimidate her. The partners sat around a long mahogany table, all eyes on her as she advanced to the next slide in her presentation. "This is why I believe we should invest in Community Kitchen Collective," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Yes, their financials look messy on the surface. Yes, the founder doesn't have a business degree, but I've spent the last 3 months visiting their locations, talking to the people they serve and interviewing their staff. What they've built is real." She clicked to a slide showing photos from her site visits. In 2 years, they've opened 5 community kitchens in food deserts. They're not just feeding people, they're training them. 62% of their graduates have found jobs in the food industry within 6 months. That's not a fluke. That's a sustainable model. One of the senior partners, a man named Richard who'd questioned every recommendation Maya had ever made, leaned back in his chair. "The profit margins are thin. How do we know they can scale without losing money?" Maya had expected this question. She'd spent a week modeling different scenarios specifically for this moment. They won't scale like a traditional business, and they shouldn't try to. Their strength is in staying community-focused. But look at this projection. She pulled up a financial slide. If we invest in their infrastructure and help them streamline operations, they can replicate the model in 12 new cities over 5 years while maintaining a small but stable profit. It's not going to make anyone rich, but that's not the point. So what is the point? Richard challenged. Maya met his eyes directly. The point is that 2,000 more families will have access to fresh food and job training. The point is that we'll help build something that actually works. Isn't that why we do this? The room was quiet for a moment. Then James, sitting at the head of the table, smiled. I think we've heard enough. Let's vote. The investment passed. 7 yes votes, 1 abstention, and even Richard didn't vote no. After the meeting, James walked with Maya back to her office. You know what I love about that presentation? A year ago, you would have apologized 3 times before stating your opinion. Today, you walked in there like you owned the room. I was terrified the entire time, Maya admitted. Couldn't tell. And that's the secret. Nobody needs to know you're scared. They just need to know you're prepared. He paused at her office door. By the way, there's something I wanted to discuss with you. Maya's stomach did a small flip. Even after all this time, those words still made her nervous. The partners have been talking. We're expanding the fund, bringing on new investors, growing the team. We need someone to lead the new initiative focused specifically on founder development, not just writing checks but actually mentoring these entrepreneurs, helping them build sustainable businesses. That sounds amazing. Who are you thinking? James gave her a look. Maya, I'm talking about you. The words took a second to land. Me? Lead an entire initiative? You're already doing the work. Every founder we invest in asks to work with you specifically. You have a gift for seeing potential and helping people reach it. He handed her a folder. Full partner track. Equity in the fund. You'd still report to me for now, but you'd have your own team, your own budget, your own decision-making authority. Maya opened the folder with shaking hands. The title at the top read, Director of Founder Development. She couldn't find the words. Deserved. This is deserved, James smiled. Take a few days to think about it. But between you and me, I hope you say yes. That evening, Maya didn't take the bus home. She walked, needing time to process everything. The city was beautiful in the early evening light, all golden and alive with people heading home from work. She thought about the girl who'd walked into the Grandview Hotel 19 months ago. The one who'd been so afraid of everything, who'd believed temporary was all she deserved. That version of herself felt like a different person now. Her phone rang. It was her mother. Mia, are you coming for dinner? I made your favorite. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Mom, something happened today. Something big? Good big or bad big? Maya laughed. Really good big. I'll tell you when I get there. At her mother's apartment, a much nicer one now, with an actual bedroom and a kitchen that didn't have a leaking faucet, Maya shared the news over homemade tamales. Her mother cried, which made Maya cry, and they sat at the kitchen table holding hands like they had so many times before. I'm so proud of you, her mother said, but you know what makes me proudest? It's not the job or the title. It's that you bet on yourself. That's the hardest thing to do. I didn't do it alone. James saw something in me, because it was there to see. He just gave you the chance. You did the rest. Her mother squeezed her hand. Don't forget that. The next morning, Maya woke up early and went for a run. Something she'd started doing 6 months ago when stress from work was eating her alive. The running helped her think. As her feet hit the pavement, she thought about what taking this role would mean. More responsibility, higher stakes, people depending on her decisions. But she also thought about all the founders she'd met. The ones with brilliant ideas and no resources. The ones who'd been told they weren't the right fit, didn't have the right background, didn't look like what investors expected. She thought about herself standing behind that hotel desk, convinced she'd never be more than temporary. Someone had taken a chance on her. Now she could take chances on others. By the time she got back to her apartment, she'd made her decision. She texted James. My answer is yes. When do I start? His response came immediately. You already have. Welcome to leadership. 3 months later, Maya sat across from a young woman named Keisha, who was pitching a tutoring program for first-generation college students. The presentation was rough. The financial projections were optimistic to the point of unrealistic. But when Keisha talked about why she'd started the program, because she'd almost dropped out freshman year and wished someone had been there to help, her passion was undeniable. "Here's the thing," Maya said gently when the pitch ended. "Your numbers need work. Your business model has gaps, but your mission is solid and you clearly understand the problem because you lived it." Keisha's face fell. "So that's a no?" "That's a not yet," Maya smiled. "I'm going to assign you a mentor from our team. We're going to spend the next 3 months working with you to strengthen your model. Then you'll pitch again. And if you put in the work, I think you'll get funded." "Really? You do that? Really? Someone did it for me once. Now I'm doing it for you." After Keisha left, Maya stood at her office window looking out at the city. From up here on the 9th floor, everything looked different than it had from the reception desk at the Grandview Hotel. But some things hadn't changed. She still took the bus sometimes, even though she could afford a car now. She still had coffee with her mother every Sunday. She still remembered what it felt like to be invisible. That memory kept her grounded, kept her honest, kept her looking for potential in places other people ignored. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Your next meeting is in 5 minutes. The team from Portland with the Urban Agriculture Project." "Thanks. I'll be right there." Maya grabbed her notebook and headed to the conference room. As she walked past the reception desk in their office lobby, she thought about that quote she'd found taped in the drawer so long ago. "One conversation can change everything." It had been true. James had walked into that hotel and nothing had been the same since, but she'd learned something else too. The conversation only mattered because she'd been brave enough to act on it. Brave enough to say yes when every part of her wanted to say no. Brave enough to believe she could be more than what she'd been. That was the real transformation. Not the job title or the salary or the corner office with the view. It was learning to see herself the way James had seen her that first day. Not as a temporary receptionist filling space, but as someone with value, with insight, with potential. And now every day, she got to help other people see that in themselves. That was worth more than any paycheck. Maya walked into the conference room, smiled at the nervous founders waiting there, and said the words that James had once said to her. "Tell me your story. I'm listening." And she meant it, because she knew better than anyone that you never know which conversation might change everything. You just have to be paying attention when it happens, and brave enough to believe it's real.